When Nintendo released the Nintendo Switch, it was an instant hit. Everyone loved the fact that they could now bring console-level games with them on the go. But what about running those games on other things? We have things like the Yuzu emulator and the Ryujix, I don't entirely know how to pronounce it. There are two popular Switch emulators, which can run Switch games on your regular x86 computer. Linux, Windows, Mac, doesn't matter. But what about on other ARM systems? At the end of the day, the Nintendo Switch is just an NVIDIA Shield tablet with a special Horizon OS that Nintendo made to put on it to run their games. So what happens if you manage to make an OS that can run Switch games on ARM systems? Well, that's what this guy figured out. It is attempting to recreate a Switch game compatible operating system to run on your ARM-based devices. We're gonna go through his post over on r/Linux Gaming. Don't entirely know why it was on Linux Gaming, not just like emulation or something. We're also gonna go through the GitHub page and we're gonna take a look at it, see what it's about, see how far they've gotten, see if it's in any sort of usable state, potentially try it out. That might actually be a different video though. But with that, let's get into it. What's good, everybody? My name is Rogren. I am a emulation-based VTuber and talk about free tech, emulation tech, and occasionally talk about Linux stuff because I think Linux is cool and also it's a really good platform to build emulation machines. But today we're going back to the focus of gaming and emulation with something that's not emulation. Of all things, we're going to be talking about this person. Let's see, what's their username again? Ken TJ Hall, introducing what they're calling Horizon Linux. So let's just go through and let's read their post on Reddit, which has gotten a lot of rewards. Holy crap, that's a lot. Introducing Horizon Linux. What? Over the past while, I've worked on and off in my free time, patching the ARM64 Linux kernel to run Nintendo Switch games natively. Oh, okay, so they're also helping out with the ARM systems for Linux kernel. That's super cool, actually. For example, by taking many of the Switch's Horizon OS system calls and implementing their behavior using Linux existing facilities for memory management, scheduling, synchronization, etc. That is an interesting way to go about that. That's actually really cool. Why? Well, my original thought was merely that I wanted to run Switch games on my MacBook. Given that they're powered by the same ARM64 architecture, you should be able to run a Switch game's machine code right on the CPU. No x86 translation layer needed. I was hoping to be able to achieve this entirely in user space by attaching via ptrace to a process executing the Switch's game code and trapping system calls to the tracer process. I'm lost. I have totally lost what you're saying. But if I recall, this quickly proved infeasible without OS support for various reasons to do with a Switch's program's use of system registers. If I'd had to poke around with the OS anyway, I figured I may as well just handle everything within the kernel. Then I just use virtualized said OS under Mac OS. Oh my god. Patching ARM64 Linux means that you get Linux's vast hardware driver support for free, so not only can it be virtualized on Apple Silicon Macs, but it can also run bare metal on any ARM64 hardware which supports Linux, even on lower-end hardware. Given that there's no need to emulate the CPU, this should offer a good deal of flexibility in the future for running Switch games, and hopefully will provide useful options for game preservation. Note that this is not an attempt to accurately recreate the Horizon OS, nor is it particularly intended to run on an actual Switch, as I believe is the case for the Mesosphere project. I've never heard of that either. Maybe I'll make a video about that at some point. Though you probably could, as I'm aware that the Switch can run Android at least. Rather, Horizon Linux is my attempt to enable Switch games to run on any ARM64 hardware. How? So in addition to OS support in handling Horizon system calls, a Switch program needs to be able to communicate with a number of system services that handle things like input, audio, graphics, etc. Rather than reinvent the wheel, I figured the easiest approach would be to take the open source Yuzu emulator and to gut out the things I didn't need, namely kernel CPU emulation, essentially keeping only the system services, GPU emulation, and app loader. This necessitated a custom system call interface to interface with the kernel and a custom Linux binary format for the loader to work with. I also decided, perhaps unnecessarily, to deviate from Yuzu's model and to have each system service run persistently in its own thread, which made my reorganization considerably more involved. The custom Linux kernel is called Horizon Linux, and the Yuzu hack job it's on is called Mizu. Mizu is intended to run as a systemd service under Horizon Linux, where my work to date is now publicly available at the following repos, which we will be opening both of these when the project is far from complete. But I've finally gotten to the point where, in addition to a few homebrew demos / games I've been testing with, Horizon Linux plus Mizu is able to run the first commercial game, Puyo Puyo Tetris. That is a good game to start with. I like puzzle games. I'm not great at them, but I do enjoy them, so I am happy that they are starting with Puyo Puyo Tetris. Below is a demo of Fedora Rawhide virtualized on my M1 Max MacBook Pro, running a few Switch applications under the Horizon patched Linux 5.19.0 kernel. The first two are Homebrew 2048 and Invader and X games. Horizon apps running under virtualized Fedora Rawhide. Ooh, what is this? Hey guys, welcome to my reaction channel. This is not playing. Hello? Hello? Would you like to play, please? Oh, the post was deleted. That would be why. With software render, okay, let's see if we got Puyo Puyo Tetris. Or was this also deleted? This was also deleted. Okay, the video shows how Puyo Puyo Tetris appears to glitch out. This is not a bug, rather due to the fact that running the game requires OpenGL 4.6. Unfortunately, I did not know anything about graphics when I set out to complete this project. I figured that I should be good to go given the vague notion that Parallels and QEMU, if I recall, already support GPU acceleration. It wasn't until many hours into the project when I was ready to test graphical Switch homebrew demos that I realized Yuzu's GPU emulation, which I'm stealing, requires OpenGL 4.6, and that exposing such a modern graphics API to virtual machines in the macOS is no trivial matter. Even the macOS host only supports OpenGL 4.1. That's because Apple doesn't want to support OpenGL anymore. They want everything to use Metal. Very recently, we got OpenGL 4.3 and the latest tech preview of VMware Fusion, which offers some hope, but it still isn't good enough, as you can tell from the above demo. So until we get to OpenGL 4.6, or less likely full Vulkan 1.1 on ARM64 macOS virtual machines, there is no way of taking advantage of GPU acceleration for our Switch games. To show that the operating system functions, we can run Puyo Puyo Tetris with LLVM pipe software rendering like below. Okay, so that was the other video. But this clearly isn't playable. Even for a 2D game like Puyo Puyo Tetris, it's so slow because with software rendering, all the rendering work is being handled by the CPU, the GPU literally does nothing. I still wanted to see what's possible with GPU acceleration though, so I bought myself a Jetson Nano dev kit. It's basically the only cheap ARM64 hardware which fully supports OpenGL 4.6. Here's Puyo Puyo Tetris running on the $100 Jetson Nano. Is this one also deleted? Why are these all deleted? I want to see this. That's running natively on the CPU while still going through the same GPU emulation layer that uses. So we're not actually exploiting the fact that the Nano has the same Tegra X1 GPU as the Nintendo Switch. That's just coincidence. This could also run on any ARM64 hardware with a GPU that exposes OpenGL 4.6 or Vulkan 1.1 with the necessary extension theoretically. I'm hoping Raspberry Pi 4 will soon. That would be awesome, being able to run Switch games natively on a Raspberry Pi 4. That would be so cool. Given the significance of the commercial game milestone, I'm starting my first job on Monday. It seems like a good point to make things public and get feedback. If there's real community support for this project, I will continue working to implement Horizon system calls and Mizu services to get most games running under Horizon Linux in the future, with the hope that GPU virtualization on macOS continues to progress, and or that more cheap ARM64 devices with beefy GPUs become available. Something like the Nano could make an awesome emulation box with this OS. I totally agree with that. Or maybe someone points out to me some reason why this whole thing was unnecessary. In any case, I learned a lot in the process. TLDR, modified ARM Linux to run Switch games. So far, Puyo Puyo Tetris is the first commercial game. Might continue work with people like this. Here's some YouTube links for some of the above demos since Reddit hosting seems to be hit or miss. Yes, yes, yes. Okay, let's see this. Page to launch 2084 DNRO. Okay, so this is a Nintendo Switch homebrew game running. That's really cool. Is it? Yeah, let's turn it up to 1080. H launch Invaders NX. This is Space Invaders, I assume, or at least a port of it. Yeah, it's Space Invaders, but with prettier graphics. Is that an Xbox logo? Oh my god. Okay, so we're gonna go through this. I want to see Puyo Puyo Tetris. Puyo.nsp. Ooh. Okay. Yep, this is the GPU issues they were mentioning. GLX OpenGL. Right. Because the OpenGL version is too old. Okay, so what about here? Rawhide with software rendering. Okay, so we're gonna run the game. It's loading. Okay, so they loaded up the Mizu service, which is a systemd service, and now they're gonna run the game. And this is with software rendering. Oh shit, there's the Sega logo. It's actually running. Holy shit, this is a Nintendo Switch game running on a Mac without using emulation. This is insanity. I mean, granted, this is running at a horribly slow speed. But the fact that you can run it at all, that's the impressive part, is that this is running, just period. I love this. This is so cool. Okay, what about the other one? So we get the idea from that one. This is running on the Jetson Nano. So this one I think is using the GPU, and it'll be running at an actual playable speed, if I'm not mistaken. I don't know why it's not. Ooh, that audio is crackling. But it seems to be running faster. Yeah, this looks like an actual like 60 FPS playable frame rate. Holy shit. I mean, the audio's got some crackling. And it's obviously not perfect. But this is like actually, you could actually play the game. It's not the best experience, but it's playable. They're playing Tetris. They're playing fucking Puyo Puyo Tetris on a Linux NUC. That's amazing. Holy shit. And they're just like, what is that? Ubuntu Mate or something? I don't know. I think it's just Ubuntu with a green theme. But my god. Okay, so this is the Horizon Linux kernel. Okay, there's not much being said in this README. I guess I shouldn't be surprised. It's for kernel development. Not many people, I think, are going to look at this part of it. I think more people are going to look at Mizu, this side of things. This was last updated yesterday. Okay, cool. At the time of recording this, which is the 30th of August. Yes. This codebase is directly adapted from the Yuzu emulator, but is heavily modified to gut all kernel/ARM emulation in favor of running natively under the ARM64 Horizon Linux kernel as a persistent systemd service. This service handles the concurrent execution of necessary Nintendo Switch system services, GPU emulation, and a loader for Horizon apps. Work in progress, obviously. And how to build and install. This is so cool. So I can't run it on my Raspberry Pi, unfortunately. At least not yet. I probably could if I really tried to get something working, but it's going to end up probably the same way that it did on his Mac, where it runs like absolute garbage, which is unfortunate. But this is such a cool idea. This eliminating the need for CPU emulation will help it run on so many more devices, because you won't need as strong of a device to do it. In theory, this might even be applicable to smartphones. If you could run a custom ROM on your phone, you may be able to run a custom ROM built using bits of this Horizon OS kernel, because Android runs a modified version of the Linux kernel for its OS. I don't know for certain if that's possible, but I mean, it's an ARM-based CPU. I don't know if it has a GPU though. That would be the issue. It may be better to just emulate traditionally on a smartphone, given the differences between Android and Linux. Yes, Android runs a Linux kernel, but it's not Linux into of itself. It is so heavily modified, and most of the stuff it runs is virtualized anyway. So not as much stuff is actually interacting with that Linux kernel, that it may just end up being better to just like emulate normally on a really high-end like gaming phone, because those are a thing now. But I love this concept. I think that this is one of, if not the coolest idea I have seen in like the gaming emulation community in a long time. For a while there, everything was just system comes out, system gets old, we get an emulator. And that was cool. Don't get me wrong, it's super cool. But this generation has started doing some really cool ideas. The PS4 and PS5 emulation using like Spine and stuff, because they're emulating less and more so just translation layers. They still do emulate stuff because game consoles still have specialty hardware that they have to emulate, but things like the CPU, they don't need to emulate anymore. They can just translate that the same way that like Wine translates Windows calls to Linux calls. The GPU and CPU parts, they can kind of make easier so that you don't need as strong of a console, because I think beforehand it was like, to run an emulator, you need some computer that's like 6 times or 8 times stronger than the original hardware, which nowadays is most computers. Pretty much any computer is 8 times stronger than a Game Boy. But when the Game Boy was out, that wasn't the case. No one could even fathom running Game Boy games on something that wasn't a Game Boy. That's why dev kits have existed for new consoles, because to emulate it, for one, emulation won't be quite as accurate as the actual hardware, and two, the hardware requirements would be astronomically higher than the actual console you're developing for. That's why they make dev kits for consoles. That's why Valve released dev kits for the Steam Deck, even though they're just a PC. It's the same idea. Like, yeah, you could just throw Linux on a machine and then develop a game and then say, hey, yeah, it's for Steam Deck. But without an actual Steam Deck, you don't exactly know where your hardware limitations are. So seeing these sort of projects where they're trying to cut down on the amount of emulation used for these quote-unquote emulators. They're not entirely emulators anymore. They're now like a hybrid between an emulator and a translation layer. We're still going to call them emulators though, because that's become the colloquial term for them. Words are hard to say, but it's such an interesting idea. I absolutely love game emulation. I play so many games through emulators, most of the time because they're consoles I don't have a way to capture. Like Game Boys and stuff, I have no way to record those. My 3DS, I'm having to play 3DS games on an emulator now because I can't find my damn new 3DS that has my custom firmware so I can wirelessly capture my 3DS games. And it's driving me insane because I also have save files on that 3DS for downloaded games that I can't get anymore. I need to find that 3DS. I need those save files. I have a nearly finished game of Etrian Odyssey Untold. I do not want to have to replay that game from the start. I have like 100%ed every map up until where I was. I don't want to have to do that all over again. I want to finish that game so bad now. Oh man. Etrian Odyssey is a fun game if you haven't played them. They're like a dungeon crawl RPG with turn-based combat, but you build maps, which is cool. It's like originally on the Super Nintendo or something. But that is where I'm gonna call today's video. I hope you guys were interested. I hope you guys found this interesting. These sort of things are such a cool idea. I can't overstate this. It's such a cool idea. I'm honestly shocked Modern Vintage Gamer hasn't made a video on this yet. Honestly, if you guys watch Modern Vintage Gamer, send him this video. Have him maybe go more into it, because he actually does programming and stuff like on a regular basis. He's helped with like game ports and stuff, like official game ports for a bunch of different stuff. I think he's helped with some emulators as well. This seems right up his alley. I am shocked he hasn't made a video about this. Send him this video or send him the link to that Reddit post, one or the other, I don't care which. Let him know about this because I want to see how much further in depth he can go into it. I can just give an overview. I can just talk about my thoughts on it. He can actually go in depth into it and like look at the code and see what it's doing and explain it, how it's doing it. And I want to know those things. That sounds super interesting. So yeah, let him know this is a thing. If you think he'd be interested in it, which I totally think he would, let him know. Send him this video on Twitter mentioning it, or send him the link to the Reddit post, or send him the link to the GitHub. Just make him aware of it, because it's such a cool idea. He may already be aware of it. He may be making a video on it right now as we speak, and I just don't know about it. And when this video comes up, he's already made one or something. Who knows? But I think it's a super cool concept. I want him to take a look at it because I want to hear what his thoughts on it are. But that's going to be it for me. Thank you guys so much for watching. Make sure you follow me on all the socials. I'll be linked down below: Twitter, Mastodon, Twitch, Discord, Element. Eventually, I'm going to have a Revolt server as well to go along with the Discord and Matrix servers. I'm just having to wait until I can get something to host a bridge bot on, because you have to host your own bridges for that one. And I'm currently out of computers that can do that right now. But thank you guys for watching. I will see you next time. Check me out on Twitch if you want to see me play games live, stream games, basically every Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. I will see you all next time. Peace out, everybody.